the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Founded in 1983, the Rock Hall documents the history of rock music and various rock-related genres through artists, bands, producers, engineers, and other notable figures. Located in Cleveland, Ohio, the Rock Hall annually inducts big names to be immortalized in the Hall of Fame, and over the years has included rock icons like ABBA, Jay-Z, Carole King, and Madonna. Yeah, the criteria for being in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is not dependent on being a rock artist as time has gone on. Every year the nominations have some people in an uproar of who is inducted and who is snubbed. My issue is not so much who is going into the Hall of Fame every year, but rather why specific names are not going in. So this video is going to look at 10 bands who belong in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Not a top 10, no ranking, just a list. I'm also sticking with bands and not solo artists just to help narrow things down a bit. Fun fact, Black Sabbath is in the Hall of Fame, but not Ozzy Osbourne as a solo artist. Just wanted to let you know that. Also, to make the list, the band has to be eligible to enter the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame under their own rules, meaning the band's debut full album has to be at least 25 years old, and the band has to have had a significant impact in music. And I'm putting this out there that I hope in a few years, this list is completely dated and every one of these bands eventually gets in. Feel free to come back every year and say which ones finally got accepted. That's it, you know how these videos work? Let's get to it. This is a personal one, as Rage Against the Machine was the band to truly get myself into heavier music, but I'm willing to bet this was the case for many other people. I'm also willing to bet that the Rock Hall would absolutely put the band in based off the cultural impact Rage had all through the 90s, let alone the statistical success the group had. The self-titled debut came out in 1992. Rage has been nominated in the past and voted for heavily by fans, but the Rock Hall has brushed the fan voting and acknowledgement of music and cultural impact aside for years now, which is wild to me because Rage truly seems like a no-brainer for induction. Zach's writing, Tom's innovative guitar work, the entire band's ability to create something wildly catchy while thoroughly thought-provoking. Rage Against the Machine were not just a band, they were a statement and a history lesson for rock in the 90s. Politically divisive, but that's been rock through the decades anyway. Continuing with some of the 90s groups, Soundgarden is destined for the Rock Hall. I just don't see it not happening, but it does beg the question why it hasn't happened yet, as like Rage, Soundgarden has been nominated but never inducted. That's wild to me, as this is a group that helped push grunge and alternative to the world. Ultra Mega OK was released in '88, and this is one that still baffles me. Even when you take out the tragic loss of Chris Cornell as something you have to acknowledge when putting them in, Soundgarden has been nominated, voted for by many people, and the Rock Hall still has not let them in. It also makes little sense because the Rock Hall has been losing face value for other names they put in, so keeping Soundgarden out for years on end only makes fans more disappointed. Seeing the remaining members of Soundgarden reunite at the Rock Hall induction would be a huge moment for grunge, rock, music fans in general. Side note, Audioslave should eventually go in also, but they still have a few years before eligibility. Continuing with grunge, can you believe Alice in Chains isn't in the Rock Hall yet? I understand that the band is still working with William Duvall and doing great, but they can still put Alice in Chains in the Hall of Fame, as this band has been going on for decades in 2 different generations. The story and history behind this band is massive and deserves recognition. Facelift came out in 1990, and not everyone loves to talk about the end of Lane Staley's life, but I do think this contribution and everything involving Alice in Chains is worth acknowledging. This was the bridge between metal and grunge that featured 2 of the best harmonizing singers at that time. And maybe it does have to do with Alice in Chains continuing on over the past 10 plus years with the new albums and tours, but in my mind that just reinforces how much Alice in Chains has impacted rock. Happiest story of a band? Not at all. Amazing group that deserves respect? Undeniably. I know there are some people who think the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame should focus on the American bands first, but I don't think that's appropriate at all, especially when the Scorpions were such a massive part of metal in Germany, Europe, and the world for such a long time, and are still contributing to metal as of this video's posting. Lonesome Crow was released in 1972. 19 full albums total from the Scorpions and countless world tours. The band has been eligible for decades, and Klaus has said a few years ago that being inducted would be a huge honor for the group, so they're definitely up for it. I'm not sure what the hang-up is. When you break down their success, their longevity, not being a typical rock band, but a German metal band with an amazing history, it's a history worth celebrating. I feel like this would be another strong entry for the Rock Hall, but for various reasons, Rock Hall won't put them in their ceremony, which is a bummer. Another band with a wild history that was influential in many different ways, New York Dolls fall under all the criteria for nomination and are responsible for inspiring punk rock and glam metal years before those respective subgenres exploded. While the original lineup was short-lived, the name lived on for years and was the direct inspiration for major names. The band's self-titled album was released in 1973, and the comeback was in 2006. Kiss, Guns N' Roses, and The Smiths all listed New York Dolls as a major band that influenced them. Many people think that New York Dolls are responsible for the birth of future subgenres that should be acknowledged. New York Dolls were dirty rock and roll and were once described as a burlesque act of a rock band, and in the early 70s that was a bold move. We would see styles like that over the decades fit right in and no one bat an eye at, but New York Dolls were more of the originators in rock than earned their cult following. They've earned a spot in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And now for something totally different. Even if I'm not crazy about Dave Matthews Band and the endless jam band style, I completely understand the band's following, the massive success in the 90s and 2000s, the shockingly impressive live tours, and literal millions of fan votes for the group to be in the Rock Hall. Not good enough to be inducted though, as of this video, which is another odd exclusion. Under the Table and Dreaming came out in 94, and this feels like a shoo-in band for the Rock Hall, and the older audiences who support the foundation and the people's votes who actually matter when deciding who goes in, so it's wild that Dave Matthews Band is still on the outside looking in. Dave Matthews Band was inescapable in the late 90s. They've done massive amounts of philanthropic and charity work, and they sell out tours to tons of fans who pay a lot of money to see the group jam out for hours on end. Dave Matthews fans have lasted through the years. The band's done more than enough to warrant an entry, and this is coming from someone who isn't even crazy about them. Lemmy is God, but Lemmy is not in the Rock Hall. Somewhere there are metalheads scratching their heads through unwashed hair, confusing and angry about how Motörhead still has not been immortalized in Rock Hall fame. There are metal pioneers, there are massive metal bands, and then there is a band like Motörhead who fall into both, along with having one of the most charismatic frontmen in metal ever. Motörhead's self-titled was released in 77, and Motörhead was the stable, ever-present name in heavy music that most metalheads appreciated and respected from London to LA. Motörhead also toured until the last year of Lemmy's life. This was dirty, gritty, low-life music that parents hated and teenagers lived for in the 70s and 80s. Motörhead's induction would be nothing short of a spectacle either. Think of all the big names that would fly in just to see the Rock Hall ceremony so they could see the tribute to Motörhead. I admit, a big bronze statue of Lemmy at the Rock Hall would also be great to see and just take pictures with too. William Patrick Corgan has changed and evolved the style of what the Smashing Pumpkins is and wants to have focus on his newer music. It still can't be denied how big of a name the Smashing Pumpkins are though. An iconic part of 90s music, not just rock. The music was in all forms of media and still continues to hold positive memories along with being one of the United States' best-selling acts. Gish came out in 91, adjacent to the grunge movement, and it was the Smashing Pumpkins that carried that alternative banner in full form well past the 90s. I don't think that era of alternative would have meant as much without Siamese Dream and Melancholy. Pumpkins made timeless music back then. There's definitely room for a band like the Smashing Pumpkins when you look at the groups and artists in now, and when you remember that this was a group unique sounding at a time where every alternative band had a distinctive sound and style. There should be variety in Rock Hall, and Pumpkins would bring that. It's been fairly well known for years that the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame has not been kind to metal. The heavier the sound, the more the Rock Hall distances themselves. Slayer still deserves to go in. Now that the band has rode into the sunset after decades of being thrash heroes, I think another band of the Big Four should be inducted, as they were a pivotal part of metal. Show No Mercy was released in 83, and the Christian moms against metal still have never forgotten. I do feel heavy music needs more recognition in music history, and Slayer was a consistent part of heavy music for decades. But I also feel that for many music lovers who aren't familiar with metal, and thrash especially, they only know Slayer for Raining Blood. That's unfair. Slayer are extreme, and the snooty businessmen of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame don't normally like extreme or confrontational or metal in general. As of now, only Metallica of the Big Four is in the Rock Hall, and I still don't understand why it's taken so long for Slayer to get in. Now that the band is done, it's time. For years, Iron Maiden has been the most spoken name when complaining about bands who deserve to be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I'm not even sure how I can make any other argument that has not been made for many years now. One of the most cherished metal bands of all time not having their own wing in the Hall of Fame makes the Hall of Fame much less rock and roll. The self-titled album came out in 1980. 17 studio albums, live albums, some of the best live performances in heavy music history, a legendary story in a band. It's Iron Maiden. If you clicked on this video, there's a good chance you don't need me to tell you why Iron Maiden should be in the Hall of Fame. I've read and heard the comments from band members over the years saying they don't really care about the Hall of Fame, and I also understand the endless criticism for the Hall of Fame when Iron Maiden isn't even nominated. And for many years, they're not even on the list for each year's nominations. It goes back to my original viewpoint about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. The non-rock names in the hall don't bother me. What bothers me is the bands that are not in yet. I really hope that's rectified sooner than later, especially with Iron Maiden. And that was a look at 10 bands that belong to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Who do you think should be inducted? Leave a comment, let everyone know. Big thanks to my patrons and a special thanks to Chris Doman and Dom Noble. You can have a say in upcoming videos, get weekly new music playlists, and see videos early by supporting Rocked on Patreon. Please click the link in the video description for more info. Please subscribe and ring the bell to get notified on upcoming videos, and you can keep up to date with Rocked on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Finally, I know recently that people were arguing about Dolly Parton going in. I'm fine with Dolly Parton. She's a national treasure, and we should worship her through all genres.